Okay. I will now call the Urban Renewal meeting to order. First on the list, the citizen and community group comment. I don't think I have any at this point that wish to speak. Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
Roll call, Sean.
Yeah, and then I have roll call. That's right.
Okay. Director Densmere. Director Gates.
Here.
Director Hughes.
Here.
Director Lidkey.
Here.
Director Strobel.
Here.
Director Tenbush.
Here.
Chair Drinkline.
Here. Thank you. Okay, now we're at citizen and group comment, and I don't think I have anybody in the holder, right?
No, I don't see anybody.
Okay. So next on the list, we have the consent agenda. So approval of the minutes, January 11th, 2021. Can I get a motion for that?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, I have a first and second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Turn my video on.
Okay, now we're at agency business, and I'm going to hand this over to you, Matt, because I'm sure this is your discussion.
Yes, thank you, sir. So we do have the applicant with us this time. He would have joined us last time as well, but as you may recall, we had some technical difficulties on our end and had to switch meetings and things like that. But he's with us now, and I think what we'll do is I will kind of run through some of the things we discussed in the previous meeting and then invite Heath to join us to sort of tell his story, as it were, and talk to us a little bit about some of the numbers he provided us, maybe give some feedback to some of the numbers that I ran and that you had a chance to look at. And then I guess just have some discussion and, if appropriate, motion and a vote. So, yep, we discussed the basics of this last time, but just by way of review, the proposal is to raise the building at 344 Southeast Main Street, to redevelop it as a mixed-use building with commercial facing Main Street. That would take up approximately 50% of the bottom floor, with 2 apartments behind facing the alley and then 4 apartments above. It's a total of about 7,700 square feet. And the project costs are outlined a little further on, and we'll talk about that. So let me touch on the question of additional grants or funding sources for this project. That was the board here of the Urban Renewal Agency asked me last meeting to see what else was available. We talked a little bit about this in the goal setting meeting that we had a week or so ago. And at that time I mentioned, and I'll mention now, that it seems that the only program that I can identify that has pretty well-defined sort of rules and regulations, as well as a fairly quick turnaround time in order to get it up and running to where it could be useful for this project. What I was left with was the vertical housing program through the state, or I should say it's established through state statutes, and it is administered and rolled out on the local level. So while the state does receive materials relating to our vertical housing zone, if we establish one, everything else is monitored and taken care of here locally and with the tax assessor's office at Clackamas County. The potential incentive that's available to an applicant through the vertical housing tax credit is a 20% reduction of the tax bill for the vertical improvements on a property, and it's only for the second story and above. So, or excuse me, you get 20% per floor, but you don't get your first 20% unless you build a second story. If it's a 1-story building, I guess it defeats kind of the purpose of vertical housing and density at that point, and so there's no incentive available. But for each story that you go up, there's a potential 20% tax abatement. It does not abate taxes on the land value, only for the improvements. So we'll again get into the numbers here in a little bit, but the city council in the next meeting will consider whether or not to go ahead with the vertical housing program. But we've made the assumption for the purposes of discussion here that it would be available to the applicant and that we would move forward with it. Of course, there's no obligation and that may change and we would just deal with that, but that's the assumption for right now. Before turning things over to Heath, if we can go to page 10 of your packet, which is, it says 344 Southeast Main Street financial analysis at the top. It's landscape orientation spreadsheet with a sources and uses table at the top, and then a 20-year pro forma that just below that. So in the staff report, I kind of walked through all this, but for the purposes of, I guess, the record, anyone listening, and then to tee up Heath's opportunity to speak here, I'll just put an asterisk before this conversation and say that Heath very likely will comment on why these numbers may not align exactly with what he sees as more accurate numbers, but these should be directionally correct and should at least inform the conversation about to fund a grant, to not fund a grant, and for how much. So a sources and uses table is, I guess, what it sounds like. It shows the sources of capital for development project, and then on the uses side, where that money is being applied. So if you start with the uses, I guess counterintuitively, costs involved with this project are outlined there. You've got land costs, you've got soft costs in the form of SDCs and city fees, the demolition, other soft costs in the form of design. I've separated out the contractor profit and overhead because there's a discussion to be had around that. And then the actual hard construction number of 965. In the staff report, I indicated that we're showing 965 here instead of $1 million, which is what you saw in the first application, simply because we've pulled out the design as a separate line item. So add 35 and 965 and we're back at $1 million. That's the way that Heath was presenting it in his previous application. And so anyway, that's how we get to $1 million. The sources of funding on the project come from a potential grant from Urban Renewal, this vertical housing tax credit that we're talking about, and then the contributions of the owner, which would be $1 million in cash approximately, and then this in-kind contribution. So this is one of the areas where there's some value to be realized. If this were being built by basically anyone else, that any other developer that would hire a general contractor, just any general contractor, that 193 would be tacked on to, or some number approximately 193 would be tacked onto the hard construction costs, because that's what the general contractor would be charging in order to pay their bills and make a profit. What Heath is proposing is to basically donate his time and expertise in the form of an in-kind contribution and manage the project from start to finish. He's not seeking compensation for that, but we've pulled it out and shown it as an item here that would otherwise be a part of the project cost. So those 193s basically just zero each other out on a net basis. If Heath hires someone besides Heritage Construction, this is going to become a project cost, and he won't be able to make his in-kind contribution. But because of the relationship he has with Heritage Construction, they would allow him to act as project manager and to be able to save this money on the project. So getting into then the pro forma, I've got scenario 1 and scenario 2 here. Scenario 1 captures the numbers that Heath provided in his application. That is the forecast for how much rent he would collect, commercial rent as well as residential rent, and then the expenses associated with owning and operating an income property like this. And when you take your expenses from your revenues, of course, you're left with your net operating income, which is highlighted in yellow there. That net operating income becomes an interesting and important figure in evaluating how a property is performing for an investor. Investors look at properties that they're potentially going to build or acquire in the term, and they evaluate them based on cap rates. And I've shown the formula for that. What they do is they take their net operating income and divide that by their investment into the property. And so you see in the early years, he's in the low 5s. By the time he gets out past year 10 and beyond, it starts to improve. And doesn't quite make 7% by the time he gets to the end of a 20-year hold. That doesn't mean he's not making money year to year. He is. It's just simply that most investors who have, for example, $1 million to invest are going to be looking for a return rate higher than 5% annually, or even 6% or 7%. And the theory behind that, the rationale behind that, is that they can take that money and put it into some other investment vehicle and likely get a return that's above 5, 6, 7%. So the reason why you invest in something more risky like real estate is because you can potentially realize a higher return rate. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that at 5, 6, 7% return annually, this project is pretty uninteresting to most investors. They're going to take a pass. It's just not, the numbers are not where they need to be in order to take that piece of liquidity and put it into and tie it up in a property. They're going to instead take that money and put it somewhere else where it's going to be more productive for them. So the other reason why cap rates are important is they can help you as well to establish values for an income property. Residential homes are appraised differently, but for commercial properties, they can be appraised using different methodologies. One of them is using these cap rates. And so you would take the operating income and divide it by what is considered by most investors an acceptable cap rate of 7.5%. And that'll help you to derive the approximate market value of the property. Of course, this is more of an art than a science, and these numbers are a little squishy, but if you use that formula, you can see where I've derived the property's value. And in the early years, he's well below his money that he's invested in it. Even at year 20, he's still below $900,000 for an approximate value of the building. The reason why I ran scenario 2, and we'll jump to that now, is that I guess I'm bullish about Estacada. I'm bullish about the Portland metro area. And I felt like some of the numbers that Heath gave us, especially regarding potential revenues, were modest. And so I wanted to see what this investment would look like with numbers that I thought were closer to what may be reality. So I went ahead and baked in rent increases of 2% per year on the residential units as well as the commercial rent. And that was a little more favorable than what Heath is forecasting. So I wanted to see what this would look like. The cap rates are a little bit better. You see in year 16, he does finally make it to an annual, that 7.5% annual return. And coincidentally, the property value forecasted, of course, also gets to that $1 million mark by year 16. We can't see the future. We don't know if the reality is going to be closer to Heath's forecast, closer to my forecast of that 2% escalator each year, or if it will be some other number. We don't really know, but this is at least helpful in seeing what the potential outcomes may be. So the question at hand, I guess, for tonight, well, there's two, do we fund the grant? And secondly, at what amount? The applicant, Heath, is requesting $270,000. I believe over the course of a 10-year tax abatement period available through vertical housing, he'll be able to save approximately $20,000 in operating costs. And so I'm showing that as a contribution to the project. It's not a great fit in a sources and uses table since it's going to be realized across the 10-year period, operating period of the property, but we're showing it there anyway because we want to show that it's part of this. And then I'm showing $250,000 from Urban Renewal. So is that a fair number to ask for? That's up to you to decide, but based on this financial analysis and the numbers that Heath gave us as his forecasts, I believe that request is reasonable. For the reason that I think I mentioned just a few minutes ago, take it away and the return rates just simply aren't there. And that money would be put to better use, probably on a different project somewhere else or investing in some other way. But, I'll let Heath tell you now, and I'm going to invite him in just a second to tell his side of the story. He's made it very clear that even though this isn't the most profitable project, or even that he could probably take his money and do a different project and have a better financial outcome, he wants to do this project if possible. He wants to work in Estacada, invest in Estacada, and be a part of revitalizing downtown Estacada. And showing, I think, other investors what is possible. If there are enough of these small projects built and the business district values and the perceived strength, I guess, of the commercial district increases over the short and the long term, rents come up with that, and then these subsidies aren't necessary, at least in theory. Because with escalated rents, then your net operating income is better and the numbers crunch out for the cap rates better as well. So I didn't really follow my staff report real closely here in presenting this to you, but let's go ahead and have you ask any questions at this time that you may have. And then I'd like to invite in Heath to talk to us about his application, his project, and why he's asking for what he's asking for.
Okay. Joel, you got a question?
Yeah, so just so I get a better understanding here, the projected from is it Heath or Keith? I'm sorry, it was it.
Heath with an
It's
H.
Heath. Mhm.
Okay, sorry. I'll apologize to him in a second for getting his name wrong. So the way that is it Heath? Is that his projections on scenario one? Is that your projections on scenario one?
They're his projections, except for from year 13 to 20. I've basically taken his projections and extrapolated them further out.
So we could assume based on his projections that would be the his planned rent for the next looks like 12 years roughly, right? On those apartments.
Correct. Yeah.
What's the approximate square footage of those apartments that he's planning on building?
I'm going to let him answer that because I'd have to go and dig back out his application, but I want to say that they're about 900 square feet apiece.
900, and they're 2-bedroom?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll say I think most of my questions will probably be easier to ask him directly,
Okay.
so I'll wait for him to come on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Okay. Any other questions for Matt? Paul?
hopefully not taking a step backwards here, but you've kind of outlined the benefits to the community having something like this built up and just how it would look and hopefully attract other developers here. Any thoughts on the feasibility of this project itself at the location that it's at? My main concern is parking around there, that we just don't have enough of it. And I know we touched on it in the last meeting, but it's really going to be a struggle to find places to park for 6 apartments and commercial businesses as well too. Any thoughts on that, or is that something maybe Heath can address?
We can certainly ask Keith to address it. My personal thoughts on that would be, I believe a number of spaces that they can accommodate on site is either 7 or 8. Heath will know for sure. So what that probably means is that that's probably going to be apartment parking. And then that just means that sort of de facto, the commercial parking ends up becoming on-street parking. In other words, people who are visiting the business aspect of this development would be parking probably somewhere on Main Street or nearby and walking over. On paper, we would be saying that those parking spaces would meet the requirements of the commercial and the residential, but in real life, we're probably recognizing that that parking will probably primarily for the residential use, with the commercial being out on the street and surrounding area.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Paul? Okay, Jerry, go ahead.
So along Paul's line of question, this same thing. So what are the is there anything that could, okay, let me start over. Could we do parking on in front of that, in front of that building like we have on have in our downtown, on Broadway, the diagonal parking? That's basically what I was trying to get out. Just couldn't put the words together.
Yeah, so the design of a Main Street remodel hasn't even begun yet. And so if you as a city council believe that that's the best way to maximize parking on Main Street, a diagonal orientation, I don't know of any reason why it would not be feasible.
Okay, Charity.
So I think this was briefly touched on before, but could you maybe explain, it's in the staff report grant application, the budget impact section, as far as foregoing grant offerings in the future?
Yeah, so basically what I'm trying to say there, apologies if it wasn't clear.
And you may have explained it in the past, but
I guess the thing to remember is just that this 250, if you grant it, has to come from somewhere.
right.
And the most logical place is probably to take it from grant our urban renewal grant programs, but to not do it, say, next year, but instead start taking from the last year that we would be offering grants, or the year before that, or both of them.
Oh, okay.
In order to pay for this project.
Gotcha.
So instead of budgeting $125,000 for grants in fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 27, we would budget $0 in those years because 250 went towards this project in 2021.
Okay. Got it. All right. Thank you.
You bet. Joel, you got another question?
Yep, just a quick one. Has the planning commission had a chance to review this, meet on it and discuss it and see what their input would be for any effects it would have on that area?
No, but this is an outright use. In other words, there's no land use action required. There's no decision by the planning commission required. So this actually wouldn't go on their docket unless something fundamentally changes about this that would require it to be under their purview.
Okay, so maybe I just misunderstood what the planning commission does. Don't they take a look at the effects it might have on the area, such as like the effects on parking and traffic flow and things like that?
if this were so for example, if apartments were a conditional use, or if let's say in the commercial space he was proposing to have a drive-through, for example, drive-throughs are a conditional use downtown. So in that case, they would have to do a conditional use application. Planning staff would write a staff report, and the planning commission would have a public hearing about the drive-through conditional use.
Okay.
But because apartments and retail commercial uses are both outright uses downtown, and there's no, there's just nothing that would warrant the review of the planning commission at this stage anyhow.
Okay. Yeah, my main concern was just about the parking piece, but that makes sense. Thank you so much.
Okay, Katie, you have a question?
Hi, guys. I apologize for being a couple of minutes late. Working moms, gotta love everything I do. I don't necessarily have a question. I really appreciate the well put together staff report. And I expressed before my excitement and interest in this project. I actually just wanted to take a couple of minutes to selfishly plug some numbers into everyone's brains. I know that I've been pushing for a construction excise tax for the last couple of years, and I wanted to just share with everybody, if the construction excise tax had been implemented in our city in the year of 2020, which is pretty feasible considering the fact that I had first proposed it in 2019, what I want everyone to understand is that if we'd had it in 2020, we would have brought in about $325,000 minimum. That's using the numbers based on the average permitted valuation from 2019, not 2020, because that number is now higher. But using that number from 2019 and then multiplying that just by 130 single family homes that we issued out the building permits for last year. That being said, we would have collected $325,000 had we had the construction excise tax. $13,000 of that would have been applied to administrative costs. And then of the remaining $312,000 of that fund, $156,000 would have gone to developer incentive funds alone. That's developer incentives. That's private, public, affordable, market, any kind of apartments. In this case, this project would have been a clear example of one that that requires the developer incentives. Another $109,000 would have gone toward a separate funding or separate fund just for affordable housing. So if we wanted to offer developer incentives to a private developer and then a separate fund to those that want to offer affordable housing only or affordable housing mixed in with other housing, there would be a separate fund of $109,000 that would exist today for that purpose. And then another $46,000 would have been sent to the Oregon Housing Community Services. And their purpose with that money would have been to turn around and make home ownership in our area more accessible and more affordable. So that being said, I feel really bad that we have to have this conversation about where to get grant money to support such an amazing project that I'm really excited about. I realize that right now, the most appropriate place for us to have this conversation is the Urban Renewal Agency, which is why we're all meeting today. And in that spirit, I'm very supportive of whatever this board decides. Hopefully it's all in support of this project because really this project is very, very necessary to Estacada. We need to have diversified housing options. We really, really need it. And as Matt was explaining, this is an outright use for that land anyways. So whether or not we think apartments should go there or not, there have been enough people that thought apartments would be appropriate in that location that we've already gone through all the public hearings, and that is an outright use of that space. That being said, I want to help make that pencil out for the developer. And if we need to have that conversation here, then let's have that conversation here. But I do want everyone to keep in mind as we move into the future and I bring back to the table a construction excise tax, I want everyone to remember this project and understand how a construction excise tax really would have benefited us today and how it could benefit us even a year from now. So that's all I really wanted to say. I don't really have any questions, but thank you, Matt, for putting together an amazing staff report.
Okay.
Can we, oh, go ahead, Mayor.
I think we had all the questions that are towards you, Matt. Why don't we bring Heath in and let him speak to this if we possibly could do that at this point? Would that be something?
Okay, he is in here now. He just needs to unmute.
All right. Heath, how are you, sir?
Good. Can you guys hear me?
We sure can. Thank you.
Sure. Can you actually see me?
Can't see you, but we can hear you.
Yeah. How do I get that to change? Any ideas on that?
I don't know what you're on right now. If you're on an Apple or are you on what are you on? There you go. We got you.
Yep, there it is.
All right. So, do we have any questions for Heath before I let him kind of talk about it? Is there anybody out there that'd like to ask him anything at this point? Joel, why don't we start with you?
Hi, Heath. I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to come out and talk to us. I know that sometimes going before a bunch of questions is not fun. So I was looking at kind of what you had here. I just wanted to confirm the numbers that I had to make sure that I'm heading the right direction. It looks like you're planning 6 apartments that are around 900 square feet. Would that be the correct size roughly?
Yes, approximately.
Okay. And 2-bedroom apartments?
That's correct.
And you're planning on, it looks like if I did my math correctly, the rent between 1,000 and about 1,150 over the next 10 years, roughly.
Yeah, I mean, it'll start out at about the $1,000 number, and from there, it's just a matter of projection of where rents go. So,
And yeah,
I-
based upon the projections I saw in here, as he said, he could do the first 12 years. It penciled out to about 1,150 by year 10, roughly per apartment. So sound about right to you?
sounds about right. I mean, it could end up being a little bit more, but it really just there's so many. I've owned an apartment complex in Estacada before, and I have 20 some odd rentals in the area. So I sort of went off of my, knowledge of the last so many years and where it's went up, and there's been jumps and dips. Right now, we're definitely in a bull rental market. That could change with half of what we saw in 2007. That could dip back down. So anyway, there is no magic number that somebody can put. People put percentages on growth all the time, and it never equates to a magic number. It's like a stockbroker, that's just hoping for the best.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I was just trying to get an idea. So
Absolutely.
because I see just based upon the amount I pay for square footage in my house, for example, it's a really good, based upon some of the other ones I've seen around the area and prices. And so, that's what I'm looking at is if I put my vote towards doing this, I'm putting my vote towards an investment into 6, reasonably priced apartments in Estacada, which would help with some of the housing people have had issues with. So that's what that's the route of questioning I'm taking here is to see, is this going to help people in the long run to get housing? Is it going to stay in that area? I mean, I want to ask you kind of directly face to face here is that your plan to start to keep these in an area and a pricing that is going to not only, of course, help you out, but also make sure people that don't have the higher income can maybe afford an apartment?
Yeah. So to take a moment on that, I have a totally different theory than a lot of people that own rentals. I have not had one. Again, I have 21 rental properties right now in Oregon, most of which are in the Eagle Creek, Estacada area. I have not since the pandemic had one renter miss a payment. We've gave a couple assistance because we knew ahead of time they may need it. And there's a reason for that. And I believe this strongly is that all of my properties are under market for sure. When I sold the apartment complex up by the high school, I got an offer I couldn't refuse. I almost felt bad selling it because the same people that were renting there the day I sold it, which was about 1.5 years ago, are right now paying the maximum percent the state allowed for the rent to go up each year. And that owner will continue to do that every year until he meets what he feels the property is worth. And I always feel like everybody needs a place to stay. If you treat a renter right and you treat them good, and you have your place priced slightly under the market, then they're going to stay there longer and they're going to take better care of your place.
Yeah.
If there's more turnover in your apartment, all it takes is 2 or 3 months in a 2-year period for that apartment to be empty because you have people looking for a better deal somewhere else to span that gap of $1,000 a month versus $1,200 a month. 3 months eats that up over a 2-year period. And then you also have to go in there and you have to paint the walls. You have to replace the floors. Yeah. So basically a high turnover rate is generally due to trying to maximize your dollar in the market in a rental. And again, if you fall under that a little bit, you retain people for a longer period of time and you have to do less of that out-of-pocket expense. That's worked really, really well for me over the years. And I was really very sad about the pandemic. Don't take this wrong, but the pandemic allowed me to see if my theory worked. Because you talk to any landlord that has any substantial number of rentals, and they can't say that nobody is not behind on their rent. And it would be understandable. But for us, it hasn't affected us at all. In fact, like I said, it's allowed us in the couple situations where I thought people might suffer because they were laid off. It allowed us to offer them something before they were able to come to us. So sorry for the long answer, but this is my community. I've been raised here my whole life. It's the only reason I shouldn't say it's the only reason. I want to be 100% transparent. And that's the reason I put the numbers in real numbers. It is the biggest reason that I'm wanting to do this development in Estacada and to give back to our, I think other builders will come on board. It's going to take something like this to wake somebody up like Misley and make him realize that he can sell to a developer that can make, or maybe his kids, if he's no longer around, whatever, but somebody to step up and do something over there. They need to see something in a smaller format, be successful at it before somebody takes on half of a block. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It
definitely.
does.
Long answer to your short question, but that's sort of my theory.
I think it was a great answer, and I really appreciate that. It kind of really gives me a good sense of where you are and where you stand on those things. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Heath, I gotta say that was one of the best answers I've heard in a long time. You nailed it down. That was really good. I liked hearing that. That's what we hope people would think, and that's how we hope they'd operate in our city. So we can appreciate that. Any more questions for Heath on this development? Heath, is there anything you'd like? Oh, Jerry, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I don't really have any questions. I just want to say, Heath, everything that you and your family have done for the community and in the community is greatly appreciated. If those of you on council don't know what the Stallcup family has meant to Estacada, it's been pretty huge. So I just want to say thank you for all that you've done and all that you will do in this project. I think this project is amazing. Raising kids, from the day they were born till, as long as they want to stay here. I appreciate something, housing coming in, apartments coming in that are, realistically, they're affordable for kids that are graduating high school, joining the workforce. So it's pretty awesome, pretty amazing. And I truly hope that we see more of this. But again, thank you, Heath. I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jerry. Any other questions for Heath? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Heath, do you want to add anything before we move on?
The only thing I wanted to mention too, since it was brought up previously, was about the parking. Is I would encourage, I've been on the school board. I understand. I appreciate what every one of you guys do. You know what I mean? You listen to people speak from the outside without really knowing everything, and they criticize without really knowing everything. So I don't mean this as any type of a criticism, but I really hope you look at main streets before you guys sign off on developing that and the parking along there. I know the current plan is to leave parallel parking. I would encourage you to really seriously look at the diagonal parking, like on Broadway, If you want both streets to reflect the downtown feel, that's going to be what does it. And it's going to add a lot to the area. The commercial space right now that we are hoping to build down there, that is one of the struggles we'll have in deciding what business will be successful there. Because again, I don't want to lease that space to a business that I don't think can be successful. And I don't want to be, I have a great relationship with Steve at True Value. And I definitely don't want there to be a conflict because people are constantly parking in his parking lot and trying to use the business. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So my whole point to that is the straight in parking would benefit all the businesses along that street. So, and then, oh, the other thing I wanted to mention too is I'm pretty sure I was actually talking to my architect this morning in hopes that we can move forward. And him and me were talking about the parking in the back, even though it's not traditional. Each apartment complex or each apartment unit will be assigned a parking space. Depending on what they're driving, they very easily could stack park. Okay. So like say somebody has two of these, eco-friendly cars that are only, 10 feet long, that's up to them. You see what I'm saying? If they are only using that space. So that's not ideal. And most people that live out in Estacada either have a pickup truck or, not a bunch of, but the nice thing about the downtown area is you're hoping that people will start to utilize public services more, and public transportation. And I see a lot of the people that would be renting these spaces would be working in the downtown area and therefore walking to work and maybe not needing, a vehicle. So I just wanted to mention that because I know nobody asked the question, but I heard you guys discussing about the parking and how that, may or may not be an issue. But wouldn't it be great though to have a downtown feel like the parking lot you guys added? It's great.
Yeah.
And it'd be great to have a downtown feel, especially when the weather's nice, where people could park somewhere and feel like they could just walk through downtown, and visit the businesses they want to. They don't necessarily have to park directly in front of it. And so the more inviting we make Estacada, the more we'll still see people just wandering the streets, just like you do when you go to Sisters, Oregon, or someplace like that. So anyway, sorry, I have the gift of gab, so I'll probably say a lot more.
That's all right. Keith, I might just keep you around a little bit longer because I'm kind of liking this. It gives us a little bit better image here. It's kind of nice to hear nice things, and your dream is the dream of Estacada. So we appreciate it.
I think it's all of ours.
Yeah, I think it is. So any other questions for Heath before we move on? No, Heath, we appreciate. Oh, Joe, go ahead.
Just a statement. I don't say I really agree with your diagonal parking position there because I've even had issues parking down there myself on different vehicles and stop by over at the insurance place or little stuff. I think the diagonal parking is definitely a good position to look at. And the one thing I've heard against diagonal parking is if it reduces the street size for large vehicles, but I don't think that would be an issue for that. So, but yeah, I definitely agree with your statement there. Just wanted to let you know.
Thanks.
Okay, great. We're pretty much done with Heath. We can allow him to go on his merry way. We're done with that, I think. So Heath, we appreciate you and thank you for coming tonight and kind of giving us perspective here and giving us hope.
Absolutely. And thank you guys very much. One way or the other, whether this works out or not, I do appreciate everything you guys do.
Thank you. We appreciate you, sir.
Yep.
All right. So getting back to it, Matt, is there anything you want to add before we move on from this?
I don't think I have anything to add. I was just scrolling through the staff report to make sure I haven't forgotten anything really important. I don't think so. From a philosophical standpoint, when I look at this, there's definitely arguments to be made, I guess, in favor of funding versus not. But when you look at our urban renewal plan, when you look at development that's really going to add value, both in terms of taxation as well as intangible things like walkability, aesthetics, function of downtown.
Yeah.
I feel like the arguments stack up far more on the side of funding versus not. So that's my take on things. I've provided some potential language for a motion at the end of the staff report if that's the direction you go.
Yeah, yeah, I think this is one of those projects I think we can all pretty much get on board with. I think it meets all the criteria. It definitely has value. It shows what our downtown can really be. My personal opinion, I'm totally in favor of this, but as we move along, we've got board comments here, so we'll get through that. And we're going to bring this back to the city council, right? For the vote on this, or are we going to do it right here?
You'll do it now.
Yeah,
Okay.
the only thing we're voting on in city council is the vertical housing tax credit program.
Okay.
Whether or not to fund this grant would be decided and voted upon in this meeting.
Okay, great. Great. Then would you like to do that now, or would we hold off to the end? Or, I mean, we're pretty much there, so.
I mean,
Okay.
we're there, so if there's no further discussion, then take it away.
Yeah, I think, Paul, did you have something you want to add?
I think Katie had her hand up first, though. I can
Oh, okay.
maybe take a shot here.
I was just going to make the motion. If you have a question,
I do. Just for clarification on this, Matt, we talked before about when we would award the grant, and I see number 5, grant award will be dispersed to the applicant upon certificate of occupancy. Does that mean, were we saying again, when it's finished, that's when we do that's when the 250,000 gets rolled out? Is that right? So essentially we're just promising a payment tonight, correct?
Yes, so tonight you'd make the vote, but technically neither Heath nor the Urban Renewal Agency is committed to anything in any sort of legally binding way until we draft and sign this letter of commitment, where it says the city is going to give you this much, and this is what we expect from you. And, there's a list of conditions. I've put 6 on here, but there are other boilerplate conditions that we have in every letter of commitment, stating that the program must be fully permitted, that it has to meet the downtown design standards, and on and on. Those are boilerplate conditions, and then these are a few additional ones that I was recommending. So you vote tonight, but we would draft the agreement, and then at some point over the next weeks or months, both the city and Heath Heritage Properties would sign that, and we'd be in at that point.
Okay. All right. Does that answer, Justin?
Just one quick clarification. So we talked a bit about Heritage. Are they still, so Heritage is the company that's going to be building the building, correct?
Well, potentially, yes. Most likely, yes. The only reason why I say potentially is just because we are still going to require 3 competing bids in order to demonstrate that this is a really good value to use Heritage Construction. So is there an off chance that maybe another contractor would be selected? Yes. Is it highly unlikely? Also, yes.
Okay, I was just curious.
Okay. So I guess we are at that point to vote on this, if that's okay. No more questions. All right. I'm asking for a motion on the floor. I think Katie is the one to put it. Would you like to make the motion?
I move to direct staff to prepare a letter of commitment for a grant award to the applicant for the development of a mixed-use project at 344 Southeast Main Street with the following conditions beyond standard grant program conditions. 1, 50% of the ground floor square footage facing Main Street shall be non-residential commercial space. 2, the applicant shall apply for a vertical housing tax credit once a vertical housing development zone has been established in downtown Estacada. 3, the grant amount shall not exceed $250,000. 4, applicant shall submit no fewer than 3 bids from qualified licensed general contractors after there is sufficient architectural and engineered drawings for the proposed project. 5, the grant award will be dispersed to the applicant upon certificate of occupancy. And 6, the project must be completed within 2 years from the time of the issuance of the letter of commitment unless otherwise agreed by all parties in writing.
Great, thank you, Katie. Does that satisfy all of it, Matt?
Yes, sir.
Second,
Okay. So I have a first and second. We'll do roll call vote on this. Is there any opposed? No?
Do you want me to-
Okay.
Do you want me to do a roll call vote?
Yeah, if you could, that'd be great.
Director Dunsmere,
Yes.
Director Gates,
yes.
Director Hughes,
Yes.
Director Lidkey,
Yes.
Director Strobel,
Yes.
Director Tenbush,
Very strong, yes.
and Chair Drinkline.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Well, that's good. That made me feel good. I'm sure you all feel good about that. So we did a good thing. Moving along, we're at board member comments. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add at the end of this before we move it along? Is that you, Katie?
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to one more time plug in that we just awarded $250,000 for 6 apartments. I'm really excited, you guys. I don't want to downplay that. I'm really excited. But I want everyone to keep this project in mind the next time we have a conversation about the construction excise tax and how beneficial that fund could be to our city and how future projects could come to us and we could have an impact for those future projects as well. We can't come to the Urban Renewal Agency every time someone wants to build an apartment complex and help it pencil out. But that's what we've been hearing from a lot of people, that we need to be able to help people pencil out these projects. We did that today. I'm super excited about it. I want to be able to do that in the future, which is why I'm really looking forward to having a more productive conversation with each and every one of you regarding the construction excise tax. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Katie. All right, if there's no more questions, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. And then we got about 5 minutes before city council. So if you want to take a break for a second.
So I'm gonna close this Zoom meeting and then start the other one.
All right, great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you.